Joining us now is a man who broke the story, writing a great piece for Newsmax, is Bill Gertz, our friend, senior editor at Washington Free Beacon and a Washington Times columnist. And hello, Bill. How are you?
Hi, Steve. Good to be on the program.
Well, thank you. Always great to talk to you. So, here we go again. Barack Obama, with his brand of what he considers to be foreign policy, putting the security of our country at risk, according to many. Talk about what he's going to do.
Well, yeah, this is fairly alarming in the sense that back in 2010, when the Senate was debating the New START arms reduction treaty with Russia, there was a big debate over what about the U.S. nuclear arsenal. It's aging, it needs to be upgraded, and so the president told the Republicans in the Senate, yeah, okay, you go along with this treaty, and I'll commit $50 billion over 10 years to modernize the arsenal. Well, guess what? He hasn't followed through on that. Additionally, he's getting ready to make additional cuts from the 1,550 mandated under the New START treaty to as low as 1,000. And this could happen. This was actually supposed to be announced around the time of the State of the Union, but the unfortunate political fact was that the North Koreans lit off their third underground nuclear test, and it wouldn't look too good that we're cutting our arsenal further as you have other nations building up theirs, namely North Korea and Iran. The second important element of this story that I did on Newsmax was the fact that the Russians are engaged in a fairly significant strategic nuclear forces buildup, including a number of new missiles, including missiles that are designed to defeat U.S. missile defenses, a new bomber, a new submarine launch missile. You got to ask yourself, what's going on here? The U.S. is living in Obama's, quote, postmodern world, and the Russians seem to be moving back into the Soviet period.
Yeah, absolutely, and not to mention China, and not to mention Iran, and not to mention their proxies in South America. I addressed a little bit of this yesterday, but first of all, before we get to what people are saying about this, former generals and strategic experts. To take away, to diminish our arsenal by 1/3, how does he get to do that circumventing the Congress?
Well, first of all, he hasn't announced it yet, so we don't know.
Right, but so we're playing under that premise here, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to happen. The idea is that this is going to be done in connection with the Russians. However, there have been statements by White House officials within the last 6 months or so that have even used the word unilateral reductions. In other words, it's not likely the Russians are going to go along with a new round of cuts. And the Obama administration, because they've been given this mandate back in 2009 from the president to, quote, eliminate all nuclear weapons, they're ready to do unilateral cuts, which the strategic experts, military and defense officials say this is a really bad idea. General Keller, the Strategic Command commander, has said, look, the arsenal we have now is about the size that we need to maintain deterrence. If you're going to do deterrence, that is, if you're going to deter other nuclear states from even contemplating a nuclear strike on your country, you have to have an arsenal, has to be modernized, has to be effective, and it has to be a real credible threat to those nuclear powers. And yet, we're in a situation now between sequester and the failure to fund the modernization where that deterrent is being called into question by a number of defense experts.
We're talking to Bill Gertz, who broke this story at Newsmax that the president is set to announce major U.S. nuclear force cuts soon in our nuclear arsenal. And he's also, of course, senior editor at Washington Free Beacon and a Washington Times columnist. And we're here on the Steve Malzberg Show. To me, there's not only do you need what you just laid out to protect the country and to deter any attack from any other country like Russia or China or anybody. You got to have the deterrent in effect like we did during the Cold War. But you also have to have a president, I would think, that's willing to use it and makes it known. I believe that this president has never stated and when asked, just tiptoed around the question, if we were attacked by a country with a nuclear weapon, would he retaliate in kind? And I don't think he's ever given a definitive answer.
No, he has not. And the closest he has come to not following through on his idea of completely eliminating our nuclear deterrent is by saying, well, we can't eliminate all of our nuclear weapons until all the world eliminates its nuclear weapons. But he's never discussed the concept that you have a state like Russia fairly significantly modernizing its nuclear arsenal, and then China, which is also engaged in a massive buildup of strategic nuclear forces and refuses to enter any negotiations, as we've done with the Russians and previously with the Soviets. So as I spoke to one senior U.S. official involved in strategic nuclear weapons, and he said the entire administration's approach is that America is the problem. He said it's the classic, what Gene Kirkpatrick described as the liberal Democrat view that America is the problem. Blame America first. And they look at everything that happens through this lens. And so they don't really care if the U.S. unilaterally disarms. They think that's a good thing. But they don't understand how deterrence works, and that's really what the problem is.
Well, and it goes beyond just that. You mentioned in your piece that Obama wrote a letter that's still secret in nature to Vladimir Putin that was delivered by White House National Security Advisor Thomas Donilon last month. And that he's made promises, apparently or possibly, to follow through on that little, hey, tell Vlad I'll have more flexibility after the election, and that deals with missile defense.
Yeah, this is what
it's like a 1-2 punch.
Oh, it's the worst of all possible results. They want to cut missile defense, which can protect you from nuclear attack. It's the whole notion that if you're vulnerable to attack, that somehow enhances the ability to do nuclear arms control. I mean, this is the arms control mentality, but it's crazy. It's totally crazy. And yes, that is going to happen. There are already discussions about making further concessions. They've already made huge concessions. In 2009, the administration canceled a plan to put a long-range missile interceptor site in Poland, and then they said, well, we're going to put these shorter-range SM-3 variants in Poland, and then they canceled that in March when they announced that we were adding interceptors to our sites in Alaska and in California. So it's one concession after another. The thinking is that the administration will totally cave into the Russian demands for legal restrictions on our missile defenses as the first step in opening a next round of nuclear arms talks, which would then seek to bring our warhead count down to 1,000 warheads.
Unbelievable. Mike Rogers, the House chair of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Strategic Forces, said that he basically that he's not going to allow this to happen. He's not going to allow this to happen on its own, and it's going to need affirmative authorization by Congress. He said this in late April. I mean, again, can the president just do this on his own and get away with it?
It's very difficult for Congress to mandate policies by the executive branch. It's very difficult to do. They can control the purse strings and use funding as a method, but unless you have, an affirmative policy in the administration, it's very difficult. Now, if he's smart and the Republicans are smart, which is not a given on this, they can fashion some legislation that would prevent unilateral cuts or cuts that would undermine deterrence. And that's kind of the hope, from my viewpoint, that people like Mike Rogers, who heads the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Strategic Forces, can actually produce some legislation. And, in fact, they're marking up that legislation tomorrow.
All right, let me ask you one more question, something we always seem to talk about before I let you go, and that is cyber attacks against the United States. I mean, I've heard reports, and I think we might have talked about this, I'm not sure, that, at one point our whole ability to, our whole NORAD system was down, right? I mean, someone hacked into that, presumably China.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of reports that have just come out in the last couple of days which are fairly alarming. One is that the Chinese military is back in the cyber attack business. No surprise there. I doubt if there ever was any hiatus. The other was a really eye-opening story in the Washington Post, and I tip my hat to the Post for breaking the story that back in 2009, Chinese hackers, when they broke into Google, they got extremely valuable counterintelligence information. What was that information? That information was about FBI requests to Google for Gmail surveillance. In other words, the Chinese learned what Gmail's accounts the FBI was looking for Chinese spies. Now, this is a real spy versus spy, counterintelligence, counterintelligence story, but it's extremely damaging in the sense that it will allow the Chinese to know who we suspect is a Chinese spy, and they can use that information to feed disinformation to the FBI, which has been done in the past. This is a huge black eye for the FBI that they allowed Google to be compromised by the Chinese.
You know, I don't know if you see the buying up of ammunition by Homeland Security fitting into this in any way, shape, or form, or if you just think that if it is happening, that it's just kind of a run around the Second Amendment, which there is no prohibition on. But you know, I just can't help but think, you know, now that we know about all these scandals that are just crumbling around this administration. You know, I just have such a fear. We know we've been warned, Bill, by everybody in the, you know, defense secretary on up and on down that our power grid is likely to be hit, and we're so vulnerable there. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust our government. Learning what I'm learning now, I don't trust our government, and I don't trust Obama. He knows nothing. He's not involved in anything. If the heat starts to get too hot, who knows? Maybe the power grid goes down one day. And I don't trust China, and I don't trust Russia. I just think we are so vulnerable and in such a crossroads in our nation's history that we're just ready for the picking on so many levels.
I agree completely. These are perilous times, I think, from both external threats as well as internal concerns over the government overreach. And I think we're seeing that in spades with the recent scandals about attacking the press, about using the IRS to go after the Tea Party, you know, and of course there's the Benghazi scandal as well. And
now we find out, according to PJ Media today, that at least two more whistleblowers are going to come forward, and it's not going to be good for Hillary or Obama. They're going to tell the reason why the ambassador was there, and also why help was not sent. So the report says. So it's going to get crazier and crazier, and you could look now, Bill, for you and I to either have our phone records taken or we'll get a call from the IRS pretty soon, I'm sure. Anyway, Bill Gertz, enjoy your upcoming little venture, and thank you so much. Great story at Newsmax, and keep it up, sir.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bill Gertz, ladies and gentlemen, senior editor, Washington Free Beacon and Washington Times columnist.